Good morning. I'm Jimmy Fremgen, Campaign Director for Spark the Vote. Welcome to our webinar today on how to get out the vote safely. I want to thank our moderator, David Downs from Leafly, and our panelists for joining us today. A couple quick words on what Spark the Vote is about. Vote is a cannabis consumer-centric, nonprofit campaign dedicated to registering and mobilizing voters and taking our seat at the policymaking table. We are currently engaged in 3 major efforts to get out the cannabis vote. We have a very strong and exciting retail partnership program where we're placing voter registration stations in cannabis retailers and affiliated businesses around the country. We are active in more than a dozen states now, which is very exciting. We are also offering a social media ambassador program. Please visit sparkthevote.org to find out more about that, as well as media partnerships where we're working with established influencers, celebrities, and voices in the cannabis movement. We have resources for all of this at sparkthevote.org, and we encourage you to swing on over and check it out. I'd like to now introduce David Downs. He'll be our moderator today. David directs news and lifestyle coverage as the California Bureau Chief for Leafly.com. He's written for Wired, Rolling Stone, and Billboard, and is the former cannabis editor of the San Francisco Chronicle, as well as the author of several cannabis books, including Marijuana Harvest by Ed Rosenthal and David Downs. He co-hosts the Hash podcast, and you can find him on the interwebs, on Twitter at David R. Downs, and on Instagram at David Downs. Thank you, David. Thank you to all of our panelists, and I will let you guys take it away.
What's up, cannabis voters? This is David Downs. I'm the California editor over at Leafly.com. We've got a great collection of politics-related content over there to click on over and support your opinions and positions on legalization this year in the United States. Thank you for joining us for this panel on how to get out the vote in the era of COVID-19. Thank you to Spark the Vote for holding this, and to all of our awesome panelists. I know all of the readers watching, or listeners watching, have a busy schedule. And so right off the bat, during this half-hour to 45-minute moderated panel, I wanted to give our guests a chance to introduce themselves and tell you, the watcher, really fast, 3 things you could do to help put legalization over the top in these individual states that are voting on medical marijuana and adult use in 2020, as well as votes in your local level and at your Senate level, where the decisions you make are going to decide whether or not legalization advances in terms of a shop in your town versus the Senate takes a vote and sends it to the next president's desk or does not. So first off, I'm going to throw it over to Jen at Turnout Nation. Who are you? What should these people be doing today?
I'm Jen. I'm at Turnout Nation. We are a Get Out the Vote nonprofit, and our model is based around you getting people you know, your friends, to vote. So my number one thing is going to be talk to your 5 or 10 closest friends or people you know that are kind of those sometimes voters, and ask if they're registered, ask if they've made a plan for voting, if they're voting by mail, if they're voting in person, and start these conversations now.
Sam, Headcount.
Hey, how's it going? Yeah, I'm Sam with Headcount's Cannabis Voter Project. We're a campaign to register, inform, and turn out voters in the cannabis community. And definitely going to echo what Jen just said there. Make sure everyone you know is voting, but also make sure that you are registered to vote at your current address. If you think you're registered to vote, the number one thing I will tell you to do is go verify that voter registration. People are purged from the voter rolls all of the time. You don't want to be surprised on election day or when you go to early vote. Make sure that you're registered to vote. Make sure your friends and family are registered to vote. The second thing is to get informed. Find out where your candidates stand. Find out what's on your ballot. Not just what's going on at the Senate level, at the congressional level, but also at the local level. A lot of cannabis policies are decided in DA races, city council races, mayoral races. Those have a huge impact on cannabis policy in your immediate community. So find out what's going on in your area about cannabis policy. Number 3, I would say, is to not just make sure that you're registered to vote, but that you know exactly how to vote. There's going to be a lot of sort of new voting for people this year. People are going to be voting by mail for the first time. People are going to be voting early for the first time. Especially if you're voting by mail, make sure that you know exactly what you have to do to make sure that that vote is counted, and make sure that your friends and your family know exactly what they have to do to make sure that vote is counted, whether it's signing in the right place, dropping it off at the right place, getting the ballot in early enough, making sure that it's in the envelope properly. There's a whole lot of steps, and you just want to make sure that you do every one of them absolutely right.
Great, Sam. All right. We got Jen, we got Andrew, Americans for Safe Access. Take it away.
Great. So Americans for Safe Access is a nonprofit advocacy organization that works on behalf of medical cannabis patients across the country. We research what policies are effective for patients and promote them. It's really just going to be me echoing what Sam and Jen already said, but directing you to some resources that can help you do what they said. So safeaccess.org/vote is one resource that we've built that will help you determine whether you're registered to vote, give you instructions, very simple, like bullet point instructions, that simple for how you can vote and make sure you do it on time. I know Leafly and David have built a pretty good guide for voting, and so has the Cannabis Voter Project. And so if you want to be researching these candidates and where they've supported cannabis, those are also great resources.
Awesome. Well, let's back up a little and explain to the viewers why they should vote. Does their vote count? Is cannabis on the ballot? I'm out in the trenches on Instagram now, and I see the level of cynicism among young voters. There is that thread of people who say, if I vote, I'm supporting the lesser of two evils. You even had Colin Kaepernick say he didn't vote, which was crazy to me back in the day. Jen, at Turnout Nation, can you tell us what's at stake for this election and why people should vote and why their vote matters, if at all?
Yeah, I think because, well, for one thing, I'll say because this election is as a presidential federal election, we're really heavily focused on that. And there's a lot more on the ballot, and which anyone who's ever voted in California should know, because you've seen what that ballot looks like. You've seen those booklets that come in. I've voted in other states where like you fill out 3 bubbles and there's 300 on the California ballot, especially. So there's so much more. We get so bogged down on the presidential race, and the presidential race is important. But actually, it depends on who the president is and what's going on politically. But a lot of the times, the other races on the ballot are going to have more impact on your day-to-day than just the presidential race. And if people want to think about cannabis specifically, if you're in a state where recreational cannabis is legalized, it might be tempting for people to think, okay, it's legal here now, so our work is done. And that's also not true, because there's so much policy, how it's taxed, how those tax dollars are used, regulations for dispensaries to be able to open up. All of that is decided by policy. And the people you vote into local office and state office are the ones deciding those policy. So people really need to think beyond just this Donald Trump, Joe Biden race and really think about it long term. And then the last point I'll make is that if you don't vote, the people in power have no incentive to represent your interests. So people think my vote doesn't count, it doesn't make a difference. It's like, yeah, if you don't vote, it doesn't make a difference, because those people only have to represent the voters who put them there.
Sam and Andrew, can you build on that?
Absolutely. I mean, the ballot box has really been like our primary tool for advancing cannabis policy. For example, I'm currently sitting in Maine, where medical cannabis was passed by a ballot measure in 1999. It was expanded through another ballot measure in 2009, and adult use was legalized on the same ballot that we voted Trump in 2016. All of the major advancements here in Maine have been pushed by voters. In fact, if you look at all the states where adult use is currently legal, only Vermont did so through their state legislature. When Maine first passed these policies back in 1999, public support among adults for legalization was only about 33%. In the last 20 years, that's doubled. I mean, we have the mandate now, and it wouldn't have happened without voting. Like, clearly voting has done something for cannabis and to advance this agenda.
Sam.
Yeah, this is an interesting question of, does my vote matter? Does it count? It's a thing that we hear at Headcount proper. Cannabis Voter Project is an initiative of Headcount, which is a larger voter registration organization. We primarily operate at concerts and music festivals, largely targeting young people. And one of the reasons we actually founded the Cannabis Voter Project and launched this was actually to answer that question of, does my vote matter? We encountered so many young people who feel that way, but also so many young people who want to see cannabis legalized. It was kind of this thing that we were saying often, well, do you think your vote matters? Cannabis policy has moved forward in so many places at the ballot box. It's a very easy way to demonstrate the effect of voting. It's pretty one-to-one. These things were on the ballot. People went and voted for them. Even in, Illinois, where the legislature legalized marijuana, you had that coming after, there was a big race, shook up the legislature, brought in a new governor who supported these things and who had been vocal about supporting those things on the campaign trail. So with the issue of cannabis, it's very easy to show people, yeah, voting has changed policy in this very real way that affects your life. Obviously, I think voting, affects your life in a variety of ways, but with cannabis policy, I like to say that this can be a gateway issue for young people to get involved in the political process for the first time and kind of cut through that apathy that is unfortunately so prevalent in a lot of places. Yeah.
Let's start at the top of the ticket. If you're casting your vote for president, what's at stake for cannabis? Do you guys have a sense of the different presidential candidates' outlooks and policies on cannabis, and whether a vote on that is going to be important for people to be making at that level? I'll start with Jen.
I might actually defer this question to some of the others who do some more work specifically in cannabis policy.
Yeah.
But I think it's important for voters for whom it is important to do this research, to not just show up on election day without a plan on how you're going to vote.
That's a good one. We'll talk about a plan a little bit. What about you, Sam? Are you tracking presidential positions on cannabis over the Cannabis Voter Project?
The Cannabis Voter Project, we actually spend more time tracking legislative positions. But I mean, You can go check out the public record. There are different plans that the president's, I don't think Donald Trump has actually put forth any plan regarding cannabis policy, but Joe Biden has put forth a plan regarding cannabis policy. I believe his line is decriminalization. Kamala Harris, his vice presidential nominee, is actually the co-sponsor, the chief sponsor on the Senate version of the MORE Act, which is a very comprehensive marijuana legalization bill that has been making some progress in the House, but hasn't really moved forward in the Senate, which is one reason you might see why the Senate is going to be an important issue. The Senate race is perhaps more important than the presidential race when it comes to this issue of cannabis. Yeah.
Andrew, which party promises to deliver more to cannabis voters this election?
Reflecting Sam's mention of the MORE Act, if we just look at the sponsors, the supporters of that bill, we have 108 of them. Only one of them is a Republican, Matt Gaetz. The other 107, all Democrats. We have no reason to suspect that Mitch McConnell would push through a cannabis bill in the Senate when there's 390 other bills sitting on his desk, having gone nowhere. But Joe Biden's a consensus builder. I think if the Democrats deliver a bill through the House and the Senate, he'll sign it. I don't see any world where he would oppose it. But I think if the MORE Act was put forward by Jerry Nadler, I think if Trump got a bill by Jerry Nadler on his desk, he would throw it in the trash.
I can also add that Senator Chuck Schumer called me and said, look, you have my word that if I'm the Senate Majority Leader and the Democrats retake the Senate, that I'm going to put a legalization bill on the floor and it just might pass. And I said, I don't know, man, you got some pretty moderate Democrats out there like Senator Feinstein, but he seemed pretty sanguine on that particular issue. Talk to me about how voter registration is going over across your guys' organizations. Are you seeing the voter registration numbers increase? Are you meeting goals? I'll start with Jen.
I overall, what we've been seeing in the work we're doing has been positive. I think actually because of the pandemic, people are forced to think about voting a little bit earlier than they would if voting was definitely going to be in person. And some people are passionate about it year round. Some people don't think about it until November 2nd or November 3rd when they see something in their Instagram that reminds them that it's election day. But I think because of the pandemic, and it requires making a plan, people are talking about it more. It's on people's minds. We're also in a pretty highly, I would say, politically combative environment at the moment. And that also contributes to more people thinking about it. And what we've seen with our work is young first-time voters. We're talking to a lot of people. I have people that are captains, and we'll talk about what they do, but captains with Turnout Nation who are actually 17, but they're getting their 18-year-old friends to register. So a lot of, if you look at the stats in some states, it's like there's hundreds of thousands of people turning 18 between now and election day. And in some states, in swing states, that's the difference of what won the state in the last federal presidential election. So we're seeing a lot of trends there with the 18 to 22 getting registered.
Yeah, brings up a good point, which is like in terms of does my vote count? I think the last presidential election was decided by like 60,000 votes across a handful of counties and a few swing states. And then I think back to the Bush v. Gore thing where they stopped counting ballots when I think Bush was up 500 hanging chads over Gore back in the day. It's insane to me that people still think that their vote doesn't count. Hard, some opponents are trying to sort of. Sam, over at Cannabis Voter Project, are you getting traction with those registration efforts and your guys' other efforts to activate the space?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, if you're talking about voter registration goals, I can tell you that Headcount is going to post its largest year ever in terms of voter registrations. And that's, you know, very exciting. And it's also very interesting because in light of the pandemic, we really had to shaken up a lot of our operation. I mean, Headcount's model for over a decade has been primarily registering voters at concerts and music festivals, at field events, meeting people where they are, whether it's on tour with Ariana Grande or at festivals like Bonnaroo, Lollapalooza, et cetera. And none of those things are happening, and none of them have been happening for the last 6 months. So we've had to really pivot both Cannabis Voter Project and Headcount proper towards a digital voter registration sort of plan. It's been sort of leveraging artists' social media followings and various events and using online digital tools to use voter registration. And we're going to hit our largest goal ever. And I think you brought this up a little bit, Jen, but we noticed that these numbers started spiking really early, much earlier than usual. You know, the people often in the past, it's been kind of a last minute thing, September, October, where these numbers started to really spike. We saw huge spikes starting back in June and July. And so that's something that shows there's a lot of enthusiasm going into this election.
Over at ASA, Andrew, are you guys getting your medical patients and their families to register to vote? Are you seeing any efforts there bear fruit?
To be honest, I actually don't have my finger on the pulse of that. I'm much more on the research side, so don't have much to comment on there. Sorry.
Nate, over at Cannabis Consumer Policy Council, thanks for joining us. Thanks for putting this thing together. How's your read on voter registration for the cannabis vote going in 2020?
The level of engagement we have seen has been nuts. You know, we came up with this concept about 5 months ago. And originally when we launched CCPC, you know, the goal was to help expand access and get people engaged at the local level. And when the pandemic hit, obviously that changed a lot of things. And so we were kind of curious to see what kind of energy we can get from a lot of the industry partners I've worked with for years, and the engagement they've had has been great. And we have been getting from just their willingness to put our voter registration stations in their shops. They are jumping at the chance. We are having to keep up with names, trade groups that are joining. It's exciting, and I could tell you in our very first location that we have one of our voter registration stations, and we're getting around 30 engagements a day on average, with people scanning that either to register to vote or to go to check their registration or just to go to the website. And those are just people who are scanning that. And that, you know, while that might seem like just 30 a day, if you add 100 stores on there, that's 3,000 a day. And that's, you know, that level of engagement, I have never seen before. I've been working on campaigns for 10 years now. Wow, 10 years now. And I see the energy right now with people wanting to get engaged. And that's a large part of the reason we were doing this, is I knew about all these phenomenal organizations out there, and I wanted to put them in front of those people that are more willing to be engaged than ever before.
Sam, is it hard to register to vote? What's the most frequently asked question about voter registration for people who, a lot of young people are doing it for the first time, or maybe old?
Sorry, David, I lost you there for a second.
Is it hard to register to vote? What are the most frequently asked questions from cannabis voters about registration? Like, because they live in a college town? Where do they register? That kind of thing. Where's the
Yeah, I mean,
friction point in registration?
You get those basic questions, but honestly, there really aren't that many friction points in registration. Some states try to make things a little more difficult than others. And in places like Texas in particular, you don't have online voter registration. So you get kind of, sometimes you have to register online, print out a form, and then send it in yourself or drop it somewhere off. So there's these extra steps that people get a little annoyed by. But registering to vote is it's a very easy process in most places. It takes 1.5 to 2 minutes. And we tell people 2 minutes, you can get this done. And so that's actually one thing that we're constantly trying to break. This is not a big deal. Just right now, you've got your lunch break, whatever, like get this done because it's just so important.
If I could also add on to that.
Yeah, Jen, at Turnout Nation, what are the friction points?
Something I will say before I get to the friction point, something people don't realize is the voter registration deadlines in some states are almost a full month before election day. So October 5th is a big one. That's less than 2 weeks away. And that's October 4th, 5th, 6th. There's about 20 states where the voter registration deadline is now less than 2 weeks away. So that's important for people to know. What we tell people is it's similar to what Sam says. I mean, if you have a valid driver's license, it's pretty easy to register online in 2 minutes in most states. If you don't have an ID and you're registering for the first time, it can be a little bit harder. For college students who are on campus outside of their home state where their driver's license is, they'll kind of have to decide, do they want to register locally using something like a utility bill or something like that to prove their residence in that state? Or do they want to register in the state, their kind of home state where their driver's license is, and then they have to be planned in advance to get that ballot mailed to them on campus, an absentee ballot, and mailed back in time.
Yeah,
Follow up to that. Oh, go ahead, Sam.
I mean, not to drive this point home too much because we talked about it earlier, but when you're dealing with young people, probably the biggest friction point is that apathy, is that belief that their vote doesn't count. It's not the process itself as much as their personal desire to actually take those steps to do the registering and voting. And that's really what we're trying to do, is show them that, yes, this does matter and it's not hard to do.
Yeah, if you can get a bachelor's degree, you can definitely figure out registering to vote.
Right, yeah.
What you got something over there, Nate?
Yeah, I was just going to add. I mean, for people who don't realize how much their vote actually matters. In 2010, there was exit polling that showed that 1 in 10 voters came out to vote for Prop 19. That works out to roughly 900,000 folks. Our current vice presidential candidate won her election for the AG's office by 76,000 votes. And that played such a huge role in it that it was never really acknowledged, which is fine, but it was fun on election night watching that. I still remember when it was announced like 1 a.m. that she won. But their votes matter, and it was funny because a lot of people were trying to play that off as, well, only 1 in 10, that's not a big deal. But when you look at those votes, it did. That was during the 2010 is when the whole when that whole red wave hit the entire country. And you saw the Minuteman projects, and you saw all those folks, and every other state went red except our state. And the fact that a legalization initiative was on the ballot played a huge role in that. And I think. The power is in numbers, and them getting excited means they're getting their friends excited too. And that's what we saw then. And I believe, we'll see that in states that have cannabis legalization initiatives on the ballot this year.
Absolutely.
Jen, follow-up question. If you are registered to vote, should you check on that? I've been reading a lot about voter purges and Republicans kind of running wild for the first time in decades, tossing people off the voter rolls.
Yeah, and this is another thing where it's really state by state. I'd love to see sometime down the road a process where it's just like, this is how you vote in America, but we're not quite there yet. For Turnout Nation in particular, we're doing a lot of work in Georgia at the moment. Georgia is one of those states that frequently deregisters hundreds of thousands of people. It could be if you haven't voted in the past couple elections. It could be if they send something to your home and like you didn't send it back to confirm that you're registered there because maybe you didn't notice it or you thought it was junk mail or something like that. So that's a state, and we encourage everyone, when we work with our network of captains who are out there getting their friends, making sure they're registered, they're ready to vote, and they have a plan. The first thing we ask is, are you registered? Yes. Okay. Still take 2 minutes and check that you're registered. Just make 100% sure. Like Sam was saying, if you moved, your address changed. If you're voting in person, where you vote is affected by, or yes, where you vote is decided by where you're registered. The location, your polling place is decided by the address where you're registered. If you're getting a mail-in ballot, you know, the house it's going to get sent to, unless you're doing an absentee sort of different thing, is going to be that address. So it's really important to make sure not only that you're registered, but your registration is up to date.
Sam?
No, I mean, I can't echo that enough. I mean, that's just, you know, we never ask people if they're registered to vote. We ask them if they're registered to vote at their current address, because people don't necessarily think that way. And if they say yes, we say, are you sure? You know, here, look it up. And we've got a lot of tools over at HeadCount, over at the Cannabis Voter Project, that really allow you to, it's kind of a one-stop shop to verify your voter registration. And if your voter registration is not up to date at your current address, you can register, you know, right there on the spot and get that done. So we're really excited about that kind of thing. And that's something we're pushing a lot, is that voter registration verification.
Well, this panel is also about getting out the vote amid COVID. Can you guys talk about what it's like to try to get a friend or a family member to register to vote? Do you have any tips on there? Do you have any experience there? Is that, like, I don't think I've ever told anyone personally in my life, like, hey, you should go register to vote. You know, I say it in stories or on the radio, but can you speak to tactics to getting friends and to register? Have you had any experience with this, Jen, or anybody?
Yeah, definitely. So this is exactly what Turnout Nation does. We kind of say, you don't need to get 1,000 people personally register. You don't need a phone bank and send out 500 texts. Start in your own backyard. Make sure that like your housemates, your friends, your sports teammates, whatever, people you know, just get like 5 or 10 of them and make sure they're ready to vote. And the work that we do is, you know, you are really uniquely positioned to get those people to vote. Because you're not, if anyone else on this call or listening is anything like me, I'm getting a lot of texts and phone calls and stuff from people doing phone banking right now. And I'm obviously a very active voter, right? My day job is with a voter turnout nonprofit. And even it's like, okay, like I get it, I'm voting. Like I'm kind of done with these calls, right? But so people just sort of turn off. And if you know someone personally, the difference is you can talk to them about the issues that matter to them because you know them. This is the biggest point of difference. You are uniquely qualified to talk to these people about the issues that matter to them. And so if someone is a cannabis consumer that would like to see recreational or medical cannabis legalized in their state, and they're your good friend, you know that. And what we tell people is make it about issues, especially when people say, well, I don't really like Donald Trump. I don't really like Joe Biden either. Talk to people about issues. Nobody is totally apathetic. Everybody has something that's important to them. And you, as their friend that knows them personally, you can talk to them about this. You can bring this issue up, and then you circle that back to voting. And the other thing we say is, you know, justify people's concerns, your friends' concerns. When they say, I voted before and I don't feel like I see change, say, you know what? I hear you. I felt that way before, so I get it. If we continue to not vote, we're going to continue to not see change. And again, bring it to those issues that are really important to that person.
Just as a follow-up, is it legal for me to bribe my cousin in Arizona and be like, I will smoke you out if you register to vote?
That might qualify as an incentive under federal law.
Yeah.
You're not telling him how to vote. You're not like threatening him.
Yeah, it's not voter intimidation. It's just voter encouragement, I guess.
Voter encouragement.
Little voter hangout.
Yeah, the discrepancies between state and federal law surrounding weed might be interesting there.
But I tell my brother all the time, I'm like, have you done it? Have you done it? I pester him, and he got it done. So sometimes it requires a little help from friends and family.
Should you be targeting swing states in particular? Should you be racking your brain for who you know in Pennsylvania and Michigan? If you're going to bother any family members, what states should we bother them?
The suburbs of Pittsburgh.
Very pointed.
Swing state voters are very important. I sometimes I don't like going back to points we made earlier. My video went out. But going back to points we made earlier, it's not just what's on the federal ticket. So that's important in that rhetoric of like, my vote doesn't matter because I'm in California and it's definitely going to go blue, or my vote doesn't matter because I'm in Texas, it's definitely going to go red. Yeah, it might go red for Joe Biden, for Donald Trump, it might go blue for Joe Biden, but there's a lot of other stuff on that ballot as well. So your vote matters in those races.
Andrew, do you want to jump in on turning on cannabis voters, what's at stake for them and why they should care?
Yeah, I mean, well, we know cannabis is on the ballot directly in 5 states. We'll see it in Mississippi. The voters will be able to decide on whether or not to put a medical program into place. In Arizona, Montana, and New Jersey, voters are getting a chance to put adult use initiatives into place. And in South Dakota, they're voting on both at the same time, which is crazy. So I do expect that to increase voter turnout, like Nate had reflected on earlier. Especially in New Jersey, where the legislature has just been stumbling over it for, it seems like years now. But again, like I mentioned, and you had reflected on earlier, David, that last year's presidential election came down to 77,000 votes in just a few suburbs and just a few states. If you know anyone in the suburbs of Pittsburgh, make sure they're registered to vote, and we'll show up.
Crazy.
There that we lost Pennsylvania.
One thing that, you talked about issues, Jen, and that can turn up the heat and make people vote. Can you guys speak to what can happen on the local level? Why should people engage locally? It seems like your local vote may count the most. You can be helping pick in a person who's deciding a local ban or not. In California, one of the things that's holding back pot shops is environmental laws and things like CEQA reform. It's not very sexy, but it's the difference between safe access or not, reforming CEQA in the Central Coast, for example. There's that old saying, all politics is local. Where can you guys talk a little bit about what can be at stake in local races or in regional and state races? I'll start with Nate.
Yeah, this is how I got my start in just the end of 2010. I had some growers from Yuba County reach out to me, and they were smart. They saw that these bans were hopping around, they were popping up all over the state, and wanted to get ahead of this issue. And they engaged when the county first announced it by 2000 and end of 2011, and the role they played was massive. It was just me and a group of growers, and then within about 9 months of working with our locals, they were able to jump on board with us, or the local county supervisors. And all it took was basically the threat of one conservative grower threatened to run for the board of soups in one seat. And that one supervisor jumped on board and was our biggest fan for that in entire time. And I've seen that moving forward is that, what an elected official's biggest worry is losing their job. And so when they see you speak up locally, when they see you show up at council hearings or virtually, when they see us organizing voter drives and getting people registered. I remember in Butte County when we had an ordinance there, 2012-13, we got 5,000 people registered to vote before that local election happened. And just one point I'll make backwards is that for the people who don't understand, are discouraged about nationally and feel that it doesn't matter. The reality is everything is local. And like you said, David, if people want access locally, they can complain about the state and complain about all they like, but it's at local level. And if those council members or board of supervisors know that they're going to have know that people there actually want this and are knocking on their doors, but not just that they're at risk for losing their seats, they jump on board.
Andrew, you've seen a lot of local implementation for medical laws. Can you?
Absolutely. I mean, this is one of the main focuses of ASA is organizing these grassroots state and local patient affiliate chapters. We have dozens across the country. If you go to our website, safeaccessnow.org, you can definitely find resources for local advocacy in your state. We have tons of free resources we put on our website. One of them we just finished is our annual State of the States report, which evaluates every state's medical cannabis program and scores it, grades them all, and gives you a rundown of how we came to the conclusion. So you can see how sort of your state level cannabis program is running. Sorry, move on.
Yeah, it does strikes me that like we're in this moment where we're looking at police reform and we have a lot of heartburn about how policing is done in America. And you can vote on your sheriff. You can run for sheriff. You vote on your DA. You can run for DA. We are a country that is predicated on the thesis of self-government. So what are you doing today to govern yourself and your community? Because if you're not doing anything, someone else is. And maybe they're not doing it in a way that's aligned with your values. And the point I would make to people is that apathy accrues. We are seeing the results from a decade of civil erosion in terms of engagement. And the momentum is now running away with itself in terms of this erosion. And so if we want to stop it and rebuild our civic institutions, you got to vote in every election at every level and learn what matters to you at every level and engage in it. Or you will get this situation. You will get 3 conservative justices picked in one term. You will get a state like Kentucky that will only punish you if you don't shoot at Black people. And I don't have anything to add. It's not a question. I just, want to make sure you readers know there's no one to blame but your community. If you don't like what you see in your community, it's your community, right?
I think from the law enforcement point of view, as the ex-cop here in the group, I think you're 100% right, and I wish I'd brought that up when I was first talking about the local issues. Your local DA is the one who makes so many calls. Your local county sheriff, most people don't realize this, but your county sheriff is actually technically the top law enforcement officer in your county. So even if the feds come in there, they're supposed to run things through him. Not that they always do that. But no, your local law enforcement and your local district attorney's office, they can set the tone for everything. I remember in 2006, we got a memo from our local county district, excuse me, our local county district attorney, which said that cannabis was going to be legalized soon. This was in 2006. But he said cannabis is going to be legalized soon, so stop arresting people for personal possession of cannabis. And that changed it for the entire county. Just one memo from one DA, all the police departments and the deputy sheriff stopped arresting people for that. And people don't understand the crucial role they can play. We didn't have to get a state law done. We didn't have to lobby the state legislature. Didn't have to get the governor to hop on board. Through local work, we were able to stop people in that county from getting hooked for that.
Yeah, just to belabor the point, change percolates up from the bottom. It isn't enforced from the top. And so legalization started in California with individual cities like San Francisco and Oakland saying, we're making marijuana enforcement the lowest priority for our city. Every city in America can do that. Every city in America can say, pot is less important to the police department than jaywalking, focus elsewhere. And those kind of changes add up. So if you don't have legalization in your state or in your region or your city council, here in California, we're dealing with housing issues and rent increases. If you don't like the level of housing in your area, there's a planning commission. And those board seats, those commission seats come up. You can get commitments out of people running for office that they're going to vote for housing or be the person that runs and promises housing. I think of Hunter S. Thompson, the journalist running for sheriff of his county back in the day and almost winning. And even just the act of participation can generate change, because when you're observing these officials, they tend to act more right than if they know they're operating in the darkness. One more thing I would add is that you can run initiatives. If you want a shop in your town, you want a dispensary, depends on the law, but you can go to your officials and say, give us a dispensary or I'll see you at the ballot box and we'll vote on this as a community. and it's going to cost you about $500,000 to even print up the ballot. And a lot of times they'll give you a dispensary or two, then rather than potentially have to do a divisive vote and have seats changed. Anybody comment on that?
I mean, yeah, somebody days earlier, and I think that's just a perfect thing to highlight. I mean, district attorneys have so much power over who gets charged with what. If you look at Baltimore, you got Austin, Texas coming up soon. You've got these cities and states that have not legalized, but where the number of charges for marijuana possession is dropping to basically zero because of district attorneys and changes in local laws. I mean, I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana. Louisiana isn't having any movement really in terms of decriminalization or legalization, but New Orleans voted to decriminalize marijuana about 4 or 5 years ago, and since then, possession charges have dropped down to basically nothing, and that has a huge impact on people's lives in real terms. And so, if you're frustrated that your state isn't moving forward, look towards your city council, your mayor, because they can be influenced a lot more easily. And if public opinion is on your side, there's a good chance that you can see movement.
Yeah, definitely. One theme we see throughout our State of the States report is that these things do happen locally. You mentioned Baltimore, like Marilyn Mosby. It was about a year ago she decided to stop pursuing cannabis charges, and now arrests have dropped dramatically in Baltimore. I used to live there, so that one's pretty close.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Nate.
One point I would just bring up on that note is you don't always have to win for you to make a change. I'll go back to 2010 again. 2010, when they voted on cannabis, statewide, there was 55,000 arrests for just simple possession of cannabis that year. Fast forward the next year, 2010, even though it didn't pass, what happened was every single police officer in the state had to go to that voting box and make a choice and think about it for the first time. What we saw arrests for personal possession of cannabis drop from 55,000 to 5,000 arrests in 1 year. And it's easy to try and figure out why, but if you look at one of the big factors, it was just simply making the conversation happen. Stop.
Right. And you you pushed Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger to pass decrim.
Yeah,
and try to take the wind out of Prop 19.
That would have never happened, and he pushed it, and so that's what's so interesting was they actually made it easier for cops to just write to cite people, even though it was an infraction now and not a misdemeanor. But we saw a massive drop in it, and just the conversation happening, changed a lot of stuff.
I gotta say, there's still 660,000 marijuana arrests in America each year, and so this issue hasn't been put to bed. And you would think, oh, you got a marijuana ticket, big deal. I was just writing today about how there are 44,000 collateral consequences to having a criminal conviction in America in terms of your record and your employment, and something like 18,000 of them are employment related, and something like 77 million Americans have a criminal record that is lowering their life trajectory. We are uniquely punitive in the world in punishing people after they've served their time. And marijuana is the gateway into all of this punishment. And it wasn't a question, but I think it points to what's at stake and how things sort of percolate up. Jen, I imagine most people don't do a lot of politicking with their family members. What are the top 1, 2, 3 ways people get family members or friends or community members to register to vote? How has that changed with the pandemic, if at all?
That's a great question. So Turnout Nation is a nonpartisan organization, and we tell our network of captains, who are people who have committed to getting 10 people they know to vote, that you don't have to make the conversation about a particular candidate or a particular party. You make it about exercising your voice in this civic process. And like the government and locally or federally, it's only going to represent the people that come to the ballot box. So you want to be a part of that movement. And in terms of bringing it up and talking to them during the pandemic, our method, where rather than knocking on strangers' doors, you're just starting in your own backyard and getting people to vote, is actually incredibly well suited to a pandemic, because we're talking to people on Zoom or texting them, stuff like that. And it can be as simple as saying, Hey, David, I just got a notification that I actually am a Pennsylvania voter. So I just got a notification that Pennsylvania sent my ballot in the mail. My absentee ballot should be here in about a week or so. Have you, are you voting by mail this year, or are you voting in person? It's the easiest way to bring it up. Just bring up something like that. It's totally apolitical in terms of parties and partisan politics. It's just getting people to exercise their voice, because the only way our country is going to represent the diversity of people and views is if all those peoples and views show up at the ballot box.
I have a follow-up if anyone wants to build
Yeah.
on that first.
Oh, I mean, I was just going to say that, over at Cannabis Voter Project, we're really, this is obviously not the only way to get your friends and family to register to vote, but we're really interested in the extent to which cannabis as an issue can be the thing that does that. I mean, I'm sure it's pretty similar to what Turnout Nation is doing in a lot of ways, but one of our primary campaigns we're engaged in right now is a text banking campaign in Arizona around the cannabis reform issue. And, we're really in these people who might otherwise not vote, but who can be persuaded to go to the polls because there's a cannabis initiative on the ballot. And so the program has really two prongs. One is reaching out to, low propensity voters. These are young people who haven't really voted much, telling them about the fact that there's a cannabis initiative on the ballot. Not as well known as, we're all in this cannabis circle. We understand that this is happening, but that's not as well known for people on the ground in Arizona as you might think it is. So letting them know that this is on the ballot and informing them about how they can go and vote. But also another prong of it is relational organizing. It's reaching out to people who are high propensity voters, who they vote in presidential elections, and letting them know that, like, yes, you're excited about this, but are your friends and family excited about this? And getting them to commit to getting at least 3 of their friends and family to get educated about this initiative and go out and vote because this is on the ballot.
So much of what's happening is happening online now, and you see so much signaling from different people on their views online, whether it's Instagram, Twitter,
people
or
have different
Facebook.
opinions.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask Jen how one should comport oneself on social media with regard to influencing peers to engage in the political process and be informed. Should we be making memes all day and texting them to our friends, or no memes? What?
All memes.
I think that's a good question. Yeah, I'm a meme fan as well. So if you can bring some humor and fun into something which is like apparently very unsexy to young voters, that's great. And like I just posted the other day, it was National Voter Registration Day. But along with it, I made a post that, like, talking about unsexy topics. The census is finishing at the end of September, and the number of seats your state has in the House of Representatives, and thus the number of points it counts for in the Electoral College, is determined by how many people live in that state. So for anybody who's listening, it's just census.gov, like, get on there and fill it out. It goes hand in hand with this civic process. But back to your original question about posting on social media, I think it's up to the individual. And if you consider yourself an activist, that is one way of exercising your ability of being an activist. You can post highly partisan stuff if you want. If you want to post more civic engagement stuff about, like, just vote and exercise your voice, that's nonpartisan, that might help you engage with more people in your circle than the kind of echo chamber super partisan stuff. Although I always like a good laugh or a good meme.
Sam, you're a creature of the internet. What's your read on social behavior to turn out the vote?
Yeah, I mean, you brought up memes, and now that I'm just thinking, we should probably do more of those. We could memify.
Yeah, you got to get your meme game up, buddy.
I know, that's where we're falling behind. But I mean, social media, that's, especially with regards to the pandemic, I mean, all these digital tools are how we have to reach people now. And so, we're really going into a lot of headcount, this sort of me+3 thing, getting people to share on social media that they're voting, sign up for pledges to vote, and then get at least 3 friends to sign on to pledge as well, and hopefully have a kind of, snowballing effect there. But yeah, I mean, like you said, National Voter Registration Day was a couple days ago, and that is a thing that takes place on social media. I mean, we, Cannabis Voter Project, spent a while getting the cannabis industry, the cannabis community really on board for a unified push on that day, National Voter Registration Day. But it wasn't just the cannabis world that was involved in this. It was happening across a ton of brands, with the idea being that, like, you should not be able to escape this on this day. Everywhere you go, you should be flooded with the fact that you need to register to vote. And it does have a huge effect. I mean, there's a gigantic bump in voter registrations on that day, both on our end, but on everyone's. It's largely due to social media.
Can I make one more point too?
Yeah,
is
please.
that there is not necessarily, this seems counterintuitive, but I promise you it's true, because who voted and who didn't is public record. So I can look up whether or not you voted. But a lot of people don't realize that. There is not necessarily a direct correlation between how often people post their strong political opinions on social media and if they actually vote. It's absolutely true. So even if someone posts a lot of stuff on social media and they seem like an activist, they're out there at the protest, just ask if they have a plan to vote, what they're doing, and then see what their response is. Because it doesn't always mean that they're definitely going to vote.
I feel like if everybody who posted an RBG meme actually voted in the last election, we would be having a completely different to replace her.
Possible,
you know, like I
possible.
almost feel like it should have been like a test. Like if you did not vote, you're not allowed to post RBG memes or actually anything. You have to go register to vote. You have to go back and make amends for disengagement up until this point. You bring up a good point. We see that in Leafly, you know, in just terms of click-throughs. You know, everyone loves to look at social, but actually clicking through to do the action that's being called on, you know, it's like 0.1% or 0.3% or 1% or whatever of people actually, you know, sort of making the move. Cannabis Voter Project, what's been your most successful call to action? Have you been monitoring the analytics? What's worked the best at people getting to click?
Yeah, I mean, the best call to action has been, you know, working with retailers, I think, to do direct text messaging through their loyalty rewards programs to register to vote. We found that to be very effective.
Cool.
Also, social media, you know, National Voter Registration Day, like I said earlier, I mean, that was an incredibly effective campaign. Got a ton of, you know, I want to take a shout out to Leafly, actually. You guys have been having some great voter registration resources. I've been using some of our tools, and we registered a good bit of people through you guys the other day. So thank you so much for that. But yeah, I mean, you know, this direct text message outreach, not just through these retailers, but through our list building efforts. We've gathered a lot of phone numbers, and we hit these people periodically with a call to register to vote. And that's really where the big numbers come in. You know, the open rates on text messages, you mentioned social media, the engagement rates on text messages are very high. And so we found them to be very effective.
Nate, what are the top 3 arguments in favor of legalization and voting for a young person? What would you tell people? Like no jail, taxes, justice. What are the 3 issues that move the under 24?
You know what? That's an interesting question because it's popped up a lot, and a lot of, I mean, because I came into this as a medical cannabis patient, you know, came out of law enforcement, and what drove me, and then getting involved in the industry for 7 years, the distinction and what pushes them are completely, and there's some stuff that lines up, some stuff that doesn't line up. And I think from the cannabis consumer point of view, you know, the top 3 things are, you know, not just no jail, you know, you don't have to worry about getting pulled out of your car because it smells like weed when the cop stops you. You know, that's a huge one that people don't realize what that one changes right away. Drug dogs go out the window. Not
right. You got to retire them.
Literally. But I mean, but no, it basically, once the odor of weed is no longer a reason, you don't have to worry about that. I remember one of the cops I used to work with during 2010 called me up, and he was like, I totally get what you're doing, but you're going to screw us on our car stops. How are we supposed to get people out of the car? I'm just like, I was like, Oscar, I remember going, you can figure something else out. But
right.
You know, the criminal justice angle, so much is focused on, you know, access to cannabis and being able to, you know, buy it. And I think those are definite issues, especially around from the patient point of view. But I think the criminal justice element is something that gets looked over a lot. And especially for the minority, our brothers and sisters who are in the minority groups, this is used as a tool to make their lives extremely hard, and it's part of, you know, it's an extension of the old Jim Crow laws. And so I think focusing on the social justice angle is a huge factor. And I would say that's the number 1, 2, and 3 for me.
Anybody else want to weigh in? I'll give you my own, what I think the kids actually care about.
I'm a young
Andrew.
voter, 25 myself. I don't know. Getting me motivated has just been paying attention to what's going on. I don't know. Anyone my age who I'm in contact with is voting and is voting enthusiastically. I don't know anyone who's not at this point. But I did know a lot of people who didn't bother in 2016. And maybe it's just that I'm not in contact with those people anymore. But I mean, I live with 4 people in college, including myself. 3 of them didn't vote in my house, and one of them was in the suburbs of Pittsburgh, where he would have voted. So
Ah!
I definitely have experienced the apathy in my life, but I, personally, I've seen it turning around.
Is it the economy? Is it the environment? Is it fairness? Is it social justice? What resonates the most with your clique?
I think seeing that the apathy probably hurt more than not.
Right.
More than
I mean,
itself.
I see it. I see it on, like, I follow Instagram influencers in the cannabis space, like Burner or whatever, and their comments are filled with really apathetic young individuals who are pretty down the, like, disinformation wormhole at this point. And they have a
people are
disproportionately
getting so-pilled on the internet. Like,
right.
Reality is separating from us entirely in that field. We don't really know what we can do about fucking QAnon before this election, if anything. But
Matthew, running our recorder, says, my wife, 2020 is depressing millennials like me. My wife hates politics because news is too depressing and she wants to focus on positive things. If we wanted to keep it positive for young voters when we're talking to them with regard to motivating them to register to vote and vote for cannabis issues, where is the sunshine? To me, it's like California arrests are down 98% and hundreds of stores are opening every year. We did $2.4 billion in legal business in the second year of legalization. And, you know, we're growing more cleaner and flavorful cannabis that's legal and tested than ever before. It's just coming in from the field. Why wouldn't you want to do this? Anybody got any, like, positive get out the vote messages for cannabis voters, or positive issues to activate the watchers who are going to be taking this to their peers in Arizona and Pittsburgh?
I mean, you touched on it. I was struggling to find something to do right out of college, and the path I wound up going down was in cannabis. And so it's opening up opportunities for people.
I think the
Nate?
social justice.
Sam.
No, I mean, I think the social justice component, you know, I mean, I guess I could see how it's perceived as a negative, but negative reasoning, because it's a depressing subject to think about, but that is a positive. I mean, arrest rates, you know, plummeting is a positive. Another positive, I think, is, you know, tax revenues and money coming into schools in places like Colorado. That's, if you want to have like a sunshine thing, like there's a sunny thing right there. It's all this new revenue that didn't exist previously coming out of the black market and into the coffers of, you know, social services and things like education.
Yeah, and the people you vote into power decide where that money goes, that tax revenue. So it's important to pick people locally whose views align with yours, because they're picking where that tax money's going. Is it going to police budgets? Is it going to school budgets? Is it going to fix the roads in your town? What's it going towards?
Yeah.
And then expungement, I think it's not.
Go for it.
Oh, I mean, you know, expungement, it's not directly legalization, but that issue has been gaining a lot of traction lately, especially in states that didn't expunge right off the bat. And so wiping the criminal records of people who, you know, like you said earlier, David, you know, how many millions of people in this country are being burdened by criminal records, can't get jobs, can't get loans, et cetera. You know, just getting rid of that for millions of people is a huge sunshine, positive thing for cannabis reform.
And
Nate?
The one thing I would do to, I'd add on there is just the fact we are winning. We have
Right? 66% of the voters.
10 years. And I remember when I first tipped my, put my toe into this, and it just the attitude, and I came from a very conservative world, but just seeing the attitudes and watching that change this last decade, going from a world where, I remember people calling me up going, it'll never happen. I'll never live in a world where cannabis could be sold at a store and my kid will see. I can't, the conversations I've had and seeing the way it's changed and it's just become normalized in the areas where it is. And I think keeping that momentum going, because the reality is especially when it comes to voting is, you only get this chance every 2 years to really, on that one day where you can make that change for everything else that you see during those, during those 2 years that drives you crazy. I mean, be excited because this is your shot to actually make that change happen. And we want to keep that momentum going, because that is what will help in cannabis prohibition as a whole down the road is nonstop, one foot in front of the other, just doing it.
Well, we've taken up maybe 45, 50 minutes of our watchers' time and their very busy schedules. I thought I want to give people a chance to give some closing remarks, emphasize stuff they've said. I want to end with, Sam, do you want to go first?
Sure. I just want to say that, cannabis reform, whether directly or not, it's always on your ballot in some way or another. We've got 5 states that are going to have actual cannabis reform initiatives on their ballot, but in every single city, in every single state, there are debates in some way or another regarding cannabis. And you need to pay attention to what's going on in your state legislature, what's happening at the local level, what's happening at the federal level, and just make sure that your vote, if you want to influence cannabis policy, that you're informed about the best way that you can do that. And no matter where you live, there is a way that you can do that.
Andrew.
Yeah, reflecting what Sam said, every vote is a vote on cannabis, because at any level, it's going to be affecting the policy. I mean, a city council might keep a dispensary out of your town. A congressperson might support or not support the MORE Act, which we need to pass. It's every vote you make counts on cannabis, just because it doesn't say cannabis.
Shout out to Mississippi. They're voting on medical. We're
Yep.
deep behind enemy lines in the South and the Midwest, pushing. There's no more low-hanging fruit left. In Mississippi, the diabolical lawmakers have a separate initiative on the ballot just designed to confuse people and defang the consumer medical initiative. Behavior, let it happen. Jen, final remarks, marching orders.
Yeah, final remarks. Well, at Turnout Nation, we equip people to help get their friends vote. So Sam kind of referred to this relational method of organizing. You can learn a lot more at turnoutnation.org, but basically we will give you an app, we will give you tips, we will give you constant support and reminders when important deadlines are coming up for your state. It takes about 20 minutes to learn what we do to get oriented, and then you're positioned to we ask people to commit to get 10 people they know to vote. And it doesn't have to be your best friends. Think of all the people you know. I heard someone once say, think of anybody you would invite to your wedding. That's kind of a good list to start with. See if you can scroll through your social media. Find 10 people and just commit to helping them vote. And not to be too boring with data, but it has been statistically shown to be the most effective way to get out the vote. More than knocking on doors, more than texting strangers. So you don't have to text 1,000 people to make an impact. If that seems overwhelming, just start with 10 people you know.
Is it going to be useful for me to tell my social media network to vote for the guy who doesn't call your friend David the enemy of the people?
Is there somebody who did that?
Yeah, Trump called all the press the enemy of the people.
Oh.
So anyway, Nate, final remarks, marching orders to our watchers.
Just the final, 3 quick points is I'd hit, and I know we've hit it before, but I'll tap it on again. Your vote matters. It does matter, as insignificant as it seems. We've said it a few times, but walk away with not only does it matter, but get involved. Right now, this is one of the most important elections of our lifetime for a gazillion reasons. And, use the resources. There's a reason I wanted to build this organization, and I wanted to sort of pull in a lot of groups with a lot of good resources who are here on this webcast. Use the resources, take the time, because the reality is you'll love it. You'll get done with a couple hours of activism and you'll have a rush that you haven't had in a long time. And that's what I'm seeing here. Here, we've taken the concept, an idea for the Spark the Vote, and in a matter of months, we've got like 7 people working on it. And people are excited. And if you are bummed out, I guarantee you, getting involved, seeing one person change, getting clicked for one person, it'll make all the difference in the world. And then after that, you are hooked, and then you're good to go. But just get out there and just do it once.
For the people who say, I'm too busy to learn about all of this, is there some voter guides for cannabis voters, the state, national, or local level? I feel like Normal does some. Who do you recommend people using as a cheat sheet for how to vote right?
Well, I do like to always direct people to our website, cannabisvoter.info. We break down where every member of Congress, every governor stands on cannabis policy, their voting records, public statements, the bills that they co-sponsor. We also break down what's going on at the state level in every state. We've got a website, cannabisvoter.info. You can find all that information. We're also breaking down what's going on with all the different ballot initiatives as well in those 5 states that are going to be voting on it. You can go there, request your mail-in ballot. You can go and you can sign up also to volunteer for our Text Out the Vote sessions, which we're doing targeting Arizona, and then there's also Montana coming up soon as well. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all for being here. To our watchers listening, thank you for watching, and I hope you're motivated. I know it's heavy out there, but this is the work in front of us. We can sit here in the rubble of our civic institutions, or we can commit right now to the work of a generation, which is rebuilding American civics at every level. We clearly have let it go a little too far, been too deep in the Netflix wormhole and assumed everything was just gonna keep cruising along just fine, but it's not. And it's good news, because when we do commit to the act of self-government, you would get to see our values reflected in the way this country operates. Like, one of the most active places for legal expungements in America right now is cannabis crime. There are thousands and tens of thousands and millions of records that are being expunged every day because of the work that's led up to this point. And it's just one little brick that's being put back in its right place. And cannabis isn't existing in a vacuum. It's tied to local land use decisions. It's tied to taxes. It's tied to criminal justice. And so when you're doing cannabis policy and you're voting right on cannabis policy, you're amplifying your participation in these other issues. So I thank you. Do not be afraid. Do not be depressed. This is the work that we have to do. And so, let's get out and do the work, and let's enjoy it. It's fun to self-govern, because the opposite is not fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
So much.